The cabin door hung crooked on leather hinges. Snow blew through the gap in pale spirals, dusting the rough floorboards. Rebecca stood in the center of the one-room space with her carpet bag at her feet and ice crusting her wool skirt. She watched the man, Silas Cain, the trapper who'd found her half-frozen on the trail, shrug off his bearskin coat and hang it on an iron hook without looking at her. "You'll be gone by spring," he said. His voice was low, flat, not cruel, just certain. She didn't answer. She was too cold to argue with a stranger and too desperate to care what he thought would happen 3 months from now. That was December of 1891. By April, she was still there, and Silas Cain had stopped asking her to leave. It started 6 weeks earlier, in a snow-choked canyon 15 miles south of the Montana border. Rebecca Wright had been riding a mule-drawn wagon with a peddler named Dutch Harmon, who'd promised to get her as far as Coeur d'Alene for $2 and her help mending his spare canvas. The arrangement lasted 4 days before the temperature dropped like a stone and the sky turned the color of old iron. Dutch pulled the wagon under a stand of pine and told her to wait while he scouted ahead for a homestead or a trading post. He never came back. She waited 2 hours, then 4. By nightfall, the mule was shivering so hard the harness rattled. Rebecca wrapped herself in every blanket she owned and tried to sleep sitting upright in the wagon bed. She woke to silence. The mule was dead in the traces, frozen stiff. Rebecca didn't cry. She had no tears left for bad luck. She'd buried her husband in Ohio, lost her farm to the bank, and spent the last of her savings on a stagecoach ticket west with the vague hope that a cousin in Idaho might take her in. Dutch had been a gamble. A foolish one. She gathered what she could carry: a blanket, a tin of matches, a sewing kit, and the last hard biscuit wrapped in waxed paper, and started walking. The storm came down like a curtain. She didn't remember falling. She only remembered the cold creeping up from her fingertips, the way the wind stopped hurting after a while, and the strange warmth that settled over her like she was sinking into a feather bed. Then a voice, rough as gravel: "Get up." Hands under her arms. Lifting. Moving. When she woke again, she was near a fire. A massive stone hearth filled one wall of the cabin. The heat was so fierce it hurt. She gasped, and a tin cup was pressed to her lips. Warm broth. She drank without thinking. "Slow," the voice said. She blinked up at him. He was tall, taller than any man she'd ever seen, with shoulders like an ox yoke and a black beard streaked with gray. His eyes were pale blue, hard as creek ice. He wore no shirt despite the cold. His chest and arms were roped with muscle, scarred in places, and slick with melted snow from the trip inside. "Where am I?" Her voice came out hoarse. "My cabin." He set the cup on the floor beside her and stood. "You were a mile up the pass. Another hour, and you'd have been dead." She sat up slowly. Her dress was still damp. Her boots were gone. "My things. I brought what I could find. Wasn't much." He crossed to a wooden box near the door and tossed her the carpet bag. It landed beside her with a soft thud. "Thank you," she said. He didn't answer. He pulled a shirt from a peg and shrugged into it, then reached for his coat. "Wait," Rebecca said. "Where are you going?" "Trapline. Storm's clearing. I lose another day. I lose the pelts." "You're leaving me here?" He looked at her like she'd asked a stupid question. "You can't walk. You'll stay till you're strong enough to travel. There's jerky in the tin, cornmeal in the barrel. Don't touch the rifle." He walked out without waiting for her reply. Rebecca sat in the empty cabin and looked around. One room, one chair, one bed, shoved against the far wall. Furs piled everywhere: wolf, beaver, marten. A stack of traps by the door. No books. No curtains. No softness. She thought about what he'd said. "You'll be gone by spring." It was fact. Like women came through here all the time and left the moment the snow melted. Maybe they did. Rebecca pulled the blanket tighter and stared into the fire. She had nowhere else to go. Silas came back after dark with 3 rabbits and a face like thunder. He skinned them outside, washed his hands in a bucket of snow, and cooked the meat in silence over the fire. He put half on a tin plate and set it in front of her without a word. Rebecca ate. It was the best thing she'd tasted in weeks. "Thank you," she said again. He grunted. That became the rhythm. He left before dawn. He came back after dark. He cooked, and he shared the food without ceremony. He never asked her name. She told him anyway. "Rebecca." He nodded once. "Silas." That was the end of it. 3 days later, She was strong enough to stand. She tested her weight on her ankle, bruised, but not broken, and began to move around the cabin. She washed her dress and hung it to dry. She swept the floor. She found a needle in her bag and mended a tear in one of his shirts that had been hanging on the back of the chair for God knew how long. When Silas came home that night, he saw the shirt folded on the table. He looked at it, looked at her. Didn't ask you to do that. I know. He hung the shirt back on the peg and said nothing else. But the next morning, he left a haunch of venison on the table before he went out. The days stretched into weeks. Rebecca fell into the work without thinking. She cooked. She mended. She kept the fire going and the cabin clean. Silas never asked her to. He also never told her to stop. He began to stay a little longer in the mornings. He drank his coffee slower. Once, she caught him watching her as she stirred the porridge, and when their eyes met, he looked away fast, like he'd been caught doing something he shouldn't. One night in late January, a blizzard hit so hard the walls shook. The temperature inside the cabin dropped despite the roaring fire. Rebecca pulled every blanket she had around her shoulders and still shivered. Silas was sitting in the chair, carving a new handle for a skinning knife. He looked up at her, then at the bed. You take it tonight, he said. I'm fine here. You're shaking so hard I can hear your teeth. Take the bed. She didn't argue. She crawled under the heavy furs and felt warmth seep into her bones for the first time in hours. She woke in the middle of the night. Silas was still in the chair, arms crossed, head tipped back. Asleep sitting up. Silas. He jerked awake, hand going instinctively to the knife on his belt. Come to bed, she said quietly. You'll freeze. He stared at her. I'm not asking you to touch me, Rebecca said. I'm saying there's room, and you'll be dead by morning if you stay in that chair. He hesitated. Then he stood, crossed the room, and lay down on top of the furs, as far from her as the bed would allow. She felt the heat radiating off him like a stove. Neither of them spoke. But she noticed he didn't get up before dawn. February came. The snow piled to the eaves. Silas taught her how to set snares. She taught him how to make bread that didn't taste like saddle leather. They didn't talk much, but the silence between them changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full of things neither of them knew how to say. One afternoon, she found him standing at the window, staring out at the white expanse of the valley. His jaw was tight. What is it? She asked. Nothing. She waited. He exhaled hard. You're still here. Yes. You shouldn't be. Rebecca set down the pot she was holding. Why? Because women don't stay, he said. His voice was rough. Raw. They come through. They take what they need. They leave. Who left? He didn't answer for a long time. Then, my wife. Rebecca went still. Married her in 81, Silas said. Brought her up here. She lasted 2 months. Said it was too cold, too quiet, too far from anything that mattered. She went back to her family in Denver. Sent the papers a year later. He turned to look at her. You'll do the same. Spring comes, you'll walk out that door. Rebecca crossed the room. She stood close enough to feel the heat off his chest, close enough to see the fear buried deep in those pale eyes. I'm not her, she said. March broke cold and clear. The snow began to pull back from the trees, and the first birds returned to the high branches. Silas started staying out longer, checking trap lines farther from the cabin. Rebecca knew what he was doing. He was preparing for her to leave. She wasn't going anywhere. One morning, she woke to find him dressed and armed, his pack already on his shoulders. Going into town, he said. 3 days, maybe 4. There's enough wood and food. Bar the door at night. Silas, I'll be back. He left before she could say anything else. Rebecca spent the first day angry. The second day, she understood. He was giving her a chance. He thought if he wasn't there, she'd pack her things and disappear, and he wouldn't have to watch her go. On the third day, she walked to the ridge above the cabin and looked down at the valley. It was brutal country, unforgiving, the kind of place that killed the weak and broke the stubborn. But it was also beautiful. The sky stretched wide and blue. The peaks stood sharp against the horizon. And the cabin, small, rough, smoke rising from the chimney she'd kept burning, looked like home. Rebecca went back inside. She took stock of the supplies. She made a list of what they'd need for the coming year. She started a stew. When Silas came back on the 4th day, the sun was setting. He walked up to the cabin and stopped short. The door was open. Light spilled out. The smell of cooking meat drifted into the cold air. He stepped inside slowly. Rebecca was at the hearth, stirring the pot. She looked up at him, calm as anything. You're late, she said. Stew's been ready for an hour. Silas set his pack down. His throat worked. You're still here. I'm still here. Why? Rebecca set the spoon down and turned to face him. Because I'm tired of running. I'm tired of losing things. And I'm tired of being afraid. She met his eyes. I don't have anywhere else to go, Silas. But even if I did, I'd choose this. I'd choose you. He crossed the room in 2 strides. His hands came up, rough and careful, framing her face like she was something precious. He kissed her, slow and sure, and she felt the fear leave him like a long-held breath. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. Neither do I.